Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, October 2nd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Maryland game is in 5 days. The game against Michigan in 54 days. There was no Ohio State football game last weekend. That's okay. There was still plenty to talk about from the previous weekend's game against Notre Dame. We did 2 shows last week with our buddy Ross Fulton, who breaks down X's and O's for us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. But there was still a lot we needed to talk about, especially in the offensive side of the ball. We're going to be doing that a couple times this week. We're going to start today with the run game and taking a look at 4 plays, a couple good, a couple bad, give you a little something to look at, some things to dream on, some things to maybe worry about a little bit. Ross, let's start with one of the bad ones. Offensive linemen, we always hear them talk about, hey, can you get someone to the second level? This is a play where you were sort of hoping to have an offensive lineman get to the second level, and then when he got there, there was no one home. So walk us through this first play.
Yeah, I mean, against Notre Dame, I'd say overall, Ohio State wasn't, they weren't getting stuffed. They weren't having a lot of negative plays. But on the flip side, they were having, even though the runs were successful, other than taking the 2 aside that we'll talk about today, they weren't getting much more than, 4 or 5 yards. And so there's a couple things going on. One of them, generally speaking, is the Ohio State offensive line needs to sustain their blocks just literally half a second longer. A lot of times it's just one guy coming off for Notre Dame often was making a play. And then the other issue is just continuing to work on getting to the second level. I do think they've improved a lot from the Indiana game in terms of, on zone plays like the one we're going to show, sustaining or executing their technique. But there still are some hiccups. So, Notre Dame do some things up front that kind of cause some issues for Ohio State. They got different ways to get into a bear front often, or here, they play two techniques. So these both defensive tackles are lined up, head up on the guard, or even an inside shade. And rather than go to combo block the defensive tackle, which I think what they probably should have done here is have a combo block the defensive tackle, and then one of them release the linebacker. But instead, center person Hinsman just tries to go straight to the play side linebacker. And as you see, he misses them and then kind of makes it, a farcical almost by sort of chasing him in a circle. At a minimum, if you're an offensive lineman and you're trying to pick up a play side linebacker and you miss them, you should at least turn yourself and pick up, a backside linebacker. Try to find someone. You're not going to chase down a linebacker and try to create a cutback. But again, these are the sort of things, Hinsman can definitely get better at getting to the second level. And I think that applies to more than just him on the offensive line. And so, these are the kind of things I do see improvements. You can definitely tell they're working on things, and it's been a big step forward since Indiana, but these are still the issues that need to get cleaned up in the run game.
Yeah, we had someone ask us on Buckeye Weekly last week, is the offensive line getting better? Is the offensive line where it needs to be? And they're not where they need to be, but they're clearly getting better. This is You can almost see week to week what they're working on, and there has been improvement. And the good news is there's some time between now and when they have to take on Penn State and go to Wisconsin and then play Michigan at the end of the year. So still more work to do, but progress. Undoubtedly, there has been progress, and progress that I think almost anyone can see watching those games. Here was a good sign of progress for Ohio State on offense against Notre Dame. Hey, the time they scored a touchdown. That was right before not the one at the end of the game, the long touchdown run by TreVeyon Henderson. This was a play that, they really needed it, and they hit a big one on the first play of the drive.
Yeah, I mean, this is, myself and others have criticized Ryan Day at times in the past for being too not diverse enough in the run game. And to their credit, the run game was, as I said, a little not sputtery, but it was sort of minimalist against Notre Dame a lot of the time. But the good news was, and we'll see that in the next couple of plays, they did continue to try to iterate and try to find plays that were working. It wasn't just we're going to keep running stretch. They ran a lot of mid zone, they ran inside zone. And here they run counter tray, which again, as I mentioned earlier, Notre Dame often was trying to jump down to a bear front. So bear we've talked about probably since Virginia Tech in 2014, cover up the center. You have 2 defensive tackles on the outside edge of each guard. And again, so that makes it tough to run zone plays because you, again, like we talked about short yardage last week, you can't get double team. But so Ohio State here smartly goes to counter Trey. They're running GT counter, so you're pulling both the guard and the tackle, and they get Henderson outside. The one thing I like about zone runs with, or I should say gap runs with Henderson, is they're a little bit easier to bounce. And as Ryan Day talked about last week, like Henderson, like everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. Like he's, as we've talked about many times, his vision on zone runs is not necessarily the best. And he's not going to break a bunch of tackles in the backfield or make sudden cuts, near the line of scrimmage. But what he can do is when he gets to the second level, he's explosive. And like he is in fact a game breaker. So, again, this gap run, I like it because gap runs tend to be easier than zone runs to bounce outside. And so anything you can do to get Henderson out in space or get him to the second level is a benefit. And this is a nice read by him. Great block by Matt Jones. We'll see a couple of great blocks by Matt Jones. People have criticized the offensive line a lot, and in so doing, you often don't focus on like individual players. It's just kind of a collective criticism. But I thought Matt Jones played really well overall against Notre Dame.
Yeah, he was someone. I think the return of Matt Jones was one of the big things that raised the ceiling for what this year's Ohio State team could be. That was someone who I think they were expecting, by and large, to potentially get Luke Whippler back and lose Matt Jones, and then neither of those ended up being true. But getting Jones back definitely raised the ceiling for this year's Ohio State team. One thing before we move on, something that I keep forgetting to mention, something that will raise the ceiling of this podcast for you is we do have, if you're listening to this, you can find this on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. We have started editing in the plays, the video of the plays, in a lot of cases, the replays as well, so you can see a couple of angles. So, this is obviously not the easiest thing to digest through the podcast medium, but if you want to see what we're talking about, you can find that on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. All right. So here's one that they may not want to see. This is one where you get the backside defensive end crashes, and, you have an interesting note in here about something they're not doing that could really help with plays like this.
Yeah. And so again, this is one critique I think that was somewhat valid after the Notre Dame game was that when Ohio State had on first down, if they had an incompletion or even a short completion short of the sticks, they ran it quite a bit on second down. I think it was like 16 of 19. I could be wrong on that stat precisely, but pretty often they were running it on second down after that. And on the one hand, it's kind of understandable, right? Like you don't want to get in 3rd and 10. And if you go pass, and punt, then it's, hey, we've abandoned the run game. We're not being balanced. You can slide down that slope. On the other hand, there's probably lean too much the other way of like, okay, we need to run the ball. And so you see that problem here, right? There's a couple things going on. So this is a stretch play. And again, I think this is an example of, offensive linemen could have sustained their blocks better. Carson Hinsman's in the backfield. Matt Jones gets a hand on the play side linebacker, but doesn't sustain a block. But the play is made by the backside defensive end. And I remember watching this live being like, where's the bootleg game? Like we talked about during the Western Kentucky game, like how nice of a job they did bootlegging off the stretch. And again, if you're going to rely on stretch, like you have, and you're not going to have a quarterback run threat, you have to bootleg. And that was absent or largely absent from this game. And so, you just don't want to see the backside defensive end just crashing down without any concern on stretch. And so again, combination of, this is again area they need to work on. Like, don't be too predictable on second down after you've had an incompletion. Don't be, you have to constrain defensive off of stretch. So there's some technical issues with the offensive line to sustain their blocks, but also some schematic concerns.
All right. And this last one is a play that could have been one of the biggest plays of the game, but because of what happened on the 2 plays after this, I think everyone has just sort of forgotten that this happened and is much more focused about the things that did or didn't happen on the next 2 plays. This is that long run, the 9-yard run by TreVeyon Henderson that set up a 3rd and 1 on Ohio State's next to last drive. Ross, we talked about the short yardage struggles on one of the previous shows last week, so we don't need to dive back into that. Let's just focus on the positive here. get everyone out on a high note. Nice 9-yard run by TreVeyon Henderson here.
Yeah, I thought it was a 10-yard run, but I guess there was no review. So, I think that the summation of sort of this segment is like things are improving. They can still get better, right? So, like again, I just criticized Ryan Day and staff for being a little too predictable on second down and not bootlegging off the stretch. But as I said earlier, like they did do a good job using a more diversified run game and trying to get. I think they're cognizant at this point that like, what TreVeyon Henderson's strengths are. And like, if we're going to rely on him, again, he's not, he's like, I contrast him to say like Blake Corum, right? Like he's not going to like keep you ahead of the chains, get like 5 or 6 yards at a time and like keep pushing forward. On the other hand, he's an explosive running back, right? So like you're going to get a couple of busts, but you're also going to get some booms. And this is close to one, a boom, but so they're trying to get him to the edge. So this is called a same side pin and pull. And so you're going to, anyone who's uncovered or anyone who's covered is going to pull, and the people that are uncovered are blocking back that side. It's same side because TreVeyon Henderson's aligned to the right side and runs to the right side. But again, this is a good play to get to the edge. I guess my hope is that they continue with these kind of plays. I know last year they ran this a few times and it was very successful, and then it disappeared. So, I will caveat that, we may not see it again, but I think the hope is that they do, because I do think, again, like these sort of gap runs where you're pulling linemen, again, another really nice block by Matt Jones pulling, gives Henderson more like a more explicit opportunity to get to the edge, which, as I said, I think we talked about the other day. To me, they have like 3 true explosive playmakers in Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, and TreVeyon Henderson. And so you want to get those guys opportunities in space.
All right, so there's your look at the run game. Not all perfect, but getting better, and a 4-0 start is not a bad thing for Ohio State at this point of the season. So we'll continue to look at the run game probably coming up next week after that Maryland game. We still have a look at the passing game, a deep dive on the passing game coming up a little later on this week. So you have that to look forward to. And again, if you enjoy these shows and you want to see them, you can find them at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Of course, you want to listen to them on the go. Not necessarily easy to do that while you're walking the dog. You can listen to them while you're walking the dog on your podcast platform of choice. And then when you get home, you can watch them again and rewind and take a look. And we try and provide you a couple angles when the good folks at the TV networks provide us with a couple angles, so you can get a real good look and rewind and make sure you're really understanding everything we're talking about. So hope you guys enjoyed that one. We'll be back with another one of these a little later on in the week. We'll be back with a lot more coverage of the upcoming game against Maryland at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Should be a lot of stuff to talk about. Will be another big recruiting visit weekend for the Buckeyes. We'll try and get Alex Gleitman on a little later on this week to talk about some of that stuff. And of course, we have our usual coverage. Ryan Day interviews on Tuesday. Ryan Day and Jim Knowles on Tuesday. Some of the Buckeye players on Wednesday. And then get you rolling into kickoff on Saturday for Ohio State. So that will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.